Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 54 of Be With Me. Today, we're going to talk about questions, and the best believers start with questions. And we find a man who we don't know his name. He's a eunuch, which means he's had surgery and removed some or all of his man parts. And of interest, he's 2,000 years before anesthesia, so just give that some thought. Anyway, the title, Best Believers Start with Question. And today we're going to talk about questioning God, because the eunuch asks a great question. In Acts chapter 8, verse 34, we find the eunuch, after reading the book of Isaiah and coming across the suffering servant passage in Isaiah chapter 53, he says to Philip, "About whom, I ask you, does the prophet say this? About himself or about someone else?" Like, who is this thing that's described, this person that's described in Isaiah 53? Who is this about? Is it about somebody from the Old Testament, or is it about somebody from the New Testament? In other words, I see somebody not in the Old Testament that the Old Testament reveals. And who is that guy? Who is the Redeemer that's spoken of in a veiled and not so veiled way in the Old Testament? And then he may expand his questioning. How are the Old Testament sacrifices fulfilled? How are sins forgiven? How is a relationship established? Or you can ask other classic questions of the Old Testament. For example, David asks, will God dwell with man? That's from Psalm chapter 8. What is man that you are mindful of him? And the Son of Man that you care for him? Why did you give dominion to man over the works of your hands? Again, those are David's questions from Psalm 8. A few more questions. Nice, fun questions from the Old Testament. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 3. How can these bones live? How can you restore? How can you forgive? How can you make things come alive again? Do you have power over life and death? And then 1 Kings 8:27, Solomon's question, great question. Will God indeed dwell on earth and have regard for mankind? Or Daniel chapter 3, verse 15, even Nebuchadnezzar, a total pagan at the time, who says, who is the God who would deliver you out of my hands? Or Micah from 6, not 8, from 6:7, and that is, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams? In other words, what can we give God? What can we sacrifice and please God? And other great questions from the New Testament that we've already encountered from Acts chapter 2. The Jerusalem people, after seeing the Holy Spirit come, ask, what does this mean? Or from Luke chapter 5, verse 21, the scribes who ask, who can forgive sins but God alone? Another great question. Or the disciples from Luke chapter 8, verse 25, on the Sea of Galilee, who then is this that he commands even winds and water, and they obey him? And then everybody from the city of Jerusalem at the triumphal entry in Matthew 21, verse 10, who is this? So here's the point from today, is everybody gets to ask a question. The eunuch here, a man, gets to ask a great question from the book of Isaiah. And is it okay to have questions? Absolutely. If God really has come down to this planet, you'll likely have some questions. If the two worlds of our earth and this heavenly world have crashed together, that is, the physical and spiritual works have crashed together, you will likely have some questions. And then if you find out one day that your works and your righteousness, your self-righteousness, cannot make the grade before God, you'll likely want to know what does make the grade. Or if you are introduced to Jesus one day, you'll probably want to know the backstory that goes back thousands of years. So if you have questions, real questions, you are in great company of the eunuch and the people of Jerusalem and the old people that have had godly encounters in the Old Testament. It is okay, it is encouraged, it is fantastic to ask a good question, and even better to answer a good question. Even Jesus gets a good question. Luke chapter 8, he says, "Where is your faith?" And later, "Do you believe?" And you remember the story in John chapter 20 when Jesus was getting his hands and feet probed by doubting Thomas, and he says to him, "Do not disbelieve, but believe." So the questions that we have, there's a relationship between the questions that we have and the question that this eunuch had and our belief. Our questions are tied to real belief. So today, as we finish, what is your question? And then I get a question at the end, because it's my job as Mr. Podcaster to say, do you believe? Same question as Jesus. Do you believe? I hope you have questions today. I hope we have a couple of answers. I thank you for listening. I thank you for believing. I'll see you tomorrow.